We're hot.
Okay.
We're hot. All right, what's up, guys? I am Francis. I am the general manager of Coal Ironworks, and we're going to relaunch this series, the Coal podcast, the Coalcast. The Coalcast. We're going to relaunch it, and we're going to kind of jump between topics and interview some cool people, and it just so happens we have some cool people here in the shop. So today we're going to start out with Nathan and David, who are two very long time members of the Coal team, mostly because Nathan helped found it, and David...
I lurked.
David lurked. Yeah. And we're going to get kind of into the history of Coal Ironworks. So I guess that initially starts out with the question of how did everyone meet, right? Like, how did you coming from Ohio meet a kid in Indiana in Illinois? So,
yeah. So I met David at Cornerstone, I think like 2011, 2010, something like that. It was before I moved to Indiana. So maybe even before 2010. So we were at Cornerstone. My best friend at the time and I were sitting at a coffee shop. And we were scrolling through these shared journals, and we opened to this page that was covered in it was like a mountain scene with a little dwarf walking with an axe over his shoulder.
No way this was the first interaction.
It was the first interaction. Oh, and we were like, wow, this is really impressive. And David selflessly turned around. He happened to be sitting behind us and turned over and looked at us and said, yeah, I did that. Then, immediately realizing what he just did, stood up and walked out of the tent.
No.
That's precisely what happened. Then the next year, so there was a year between. That was the first interaction. The next year, there were Mad Dwarf Workshop business cards on all the tables.
That was the same year. Wait.
It wasn't. No, it was the following year. So the next year, and I found it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is that guy. And I didn't think you were like... nothing. I didn't think anything bad about you. I seriously, looking back, I think that's probably what happened. But anyway, so I took the card and I kept it. And when I met my now wife, I was planning on moving to Indiana. When I moved to Indiana, I thought, for some reason,
I didn't know you didn't live in Indiana at that point.
No, I lived in Ohio. And I thought, I think that I remember these guys, the Mad Dwarf Workshop guys, being from Indiana. So I emailed you, or I found you on Facebook or something off of that card that I had from Cornerstone. And I found you, and I reached out to you, and you were like, hey man, thanks for reaching out. I don't hang out with strangers.
What?
But you
I don't believe
but you can go hang out with my ex-business partner, because you guys had split at this point and gone your own ways. And Andy was opening a school in Middletown, and you were figuring your thing out.
Yeah,
it's
I think
cool.
I was in a rough season of life.
And you were like, you should go hang out with my friend Andy. He's opening a school.
Yeah.
And I was like, done. So I reached out to Andy, and he was like, yeah, man, I have to hang all this foil paper, and I could really use some help. And so I went every week and hung that foil, that like bubble foil stuff all over Vic's shop with Andy every week for like months.
Everything you're saying is true, but you're forgetting multiple
good
key instances of number one. There was a second interaction that we had at Cornerstone. I think it was that following year.
Yeah.
And it was me and Shad
was walking around with a I do remember that.
Yeah, context my buddy.
Didn't you guys walk up to us as we were waking up on some straw bales in the middle of that field?
Sounds about right. Yeah. But it was like late afternoon, so why were you... I don't know.
We had slept in on the straw bales.
It was like evening, but maybe you guys slept in evening. It's fine. So context, my buddy Shad, still to this day, makes beautiful electric guitars and stuff. And
you should plug him. What's his at?
Gosh, he's not on Instagram a lot anymore, but Shad Peters or Peters Instruments, if you search him on Google or Instagram, you'll find him. But yeah, Shad and I were like, let's just walk around with a sword and a guitar and just like confuse people. And Shad's
mission accomplished.
Shad's guitars made a little bit more sense
at the music festival
than my razor sharp elven leaf blade like a maniac. Shad like walked up to the guys in Plea for Purging, was like, check it out, and they were like, oh wow. I don't know if he made any sales from that. But then you were like, is that a sword? Like, yeah. And then in that moment, you were like standing far back from me. Like, I'm not sure about this guy.
That was
And I was like, I think we talked last year. And yeah, man, we should hang out. Yeah. So there was that. But then you did come out to, you'll remember this. I'll be concerned for you if you don't remember this. Yeah. You did come out to my shop, which was actually on Andy's parents' property.
Right.
And it was like freezing. It was colder in the shop
No,
than
I
it
do
was
remember
outside.
that, but that was later.
Really?
Yeah, that was after I'd been working with Andy
for a while.
We hadn't started yet. I think I had come out to pick up some of Andy's stuff. That was partly why I was there.
Oh,
I was picking up like a grinder and some like hand tools and stuff that he had left.
You and I just sat. I remember like we sat in front
It
of.
was literally colder in your shop than it was outside.
And we sat in front of the wood stove burning.
That
like,
did nothing.
Yeah, chemical. This is like treated wood from Spiceland Wood Products.
Well, and also we both realized that the wood stove wasn't even connected to the stovepipe.
No. It's just the aesthetics of it. And I also remember like we had like chocolates. It's like the only food we had. It's like.
I remember
you could have just.
I think you made me some bad like K-cup coffee because you had that red little K-cup thing, right?
Yeah, it was before I understood what good coffee was.
Well, yeah, but I do remember that, but that was later. That was after Andy and I had started Cole, but we hadn't done anything yet. We were just starting to make stuff.
At that phase, Cole probably was like, like
ornamental ironwork furniture.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, was there anything else I forgot?
So, from an outsider's perspective, I had gone to Cornerstone with David the year before, and got to spend the entire week with him. Yeah. Oh, cool! I know this really cool bladesmithing guy, and was really stoked on him. Continued that relationship. Was going to go to Cornerstone with him the next year, but ended up not, and going with with Behold the Kingdom, and ended up meeting you there.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned something about blacksmithing, and I was like, oh, cool! Like I went. This is weird. Like I went to Cornerstone with a bladesmith last year, and you were like, okay, cool. For different circumstances, but that week was weird, so you just didn't have time to deal with that. But I remember David coming up to me, and he was like, hey, you can't tell anybody, but we're making a sword for a movie. Or they already had made it or something. He was like, you can't tell anybody. And I was like, oh, I have to go back and tell this Nathan guy that I just met. So I go back to my camp, and you're there, and I was like, hey, my friend makes swords. You need to meet him. And you were like,
so, okay, this is something I don't know if I've ever fully known. Did you and I know each other before?
Yeah.
That's so weird.
Yeah, because he was good friends with Greg that lived down the street from Andy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess you went to Cornerstone with me,
with you,
and my dad, and my sister. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that second year when I was with him, you came up and you told me about the Thor sword, and I gotta go tell this guy. So I go up and I tell Nathan, and hey, this guy makes swords, whatever. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, because you have stuff going on. And then you come back, a couple days later and you're like, you tell me that story of meeting David. Of, oh, this guy just drew this or whatever, and all this stuff. Okay, cool. So they met. All right, my two friends that make cool stuff, they met. Cool, awesome.
We did it.
And then I start hanging out with Greg, and Greg introduced me to Andy, and Andy's like, or I'm like, hey, like you got to meet my friends, and it turns out you're his literal best friend on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I tell Nathan, I'm like, hey, you gotta meet my friend Andy. It's David's best friend. He's like, oh, we're starting a business together. I was like, what? Yeah, he's been over here. I've been over there. Like we're like working together. We're trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
So it was really weird. Like the whole puddle of everybody already knew each other, but I was running around thinking I was super cool. Like, yeah, you got to meet me. I have this other friend. Yeah, they made a movie or a sword for a movie, and you guys are like, I did that. I made that. I was there. I worked on it.
The time we're talking about is between 2008 to 2010-ish, right?
Yeah, because I moved to Indiana in 2010, and so you guys had already accomplished your thing, kind of figured out you were going to do different things and split. So Andy and I met right around that time frame.
Okay.
Right at the end.
It was right after you moved up here.
Yeah, so I moved here. Wait, right? Because I got married in 2011. So I moved to Indiana in 2010, got married in 2011, and started my thing. Nice. And Andy and I were working together on anything and everything. And I remember I got a commission for some stuff. I don't even remember what it was. And I called Andy, and Bender, for some reason, came with me to Andy's shop, and we worked on this commission for a boutique in Carmel.
Yeah.
So we did some installation work for her, and I had never welded before, and the whole job was welded.
Yeah.
And so I was like...
Was it for the curtains that we...
Yes.
Yeah, I remember going and measuring that out, and as soon as we left, you were like, Francis, I don't know, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I didn't. I struggled through that sucker.
Yeah.
And so we figured it out, and Andy was super helpful, and he taught me how to use a stick welder. And so I stick welded it together, which was the wrong tool, because I was welding thin wall tube together with a stick welder, with a stick welder that barely worked. Anyway, we did that job. We took on a couple other jobs. Andy moved to Tennessee and was working at a fab shop down there. Oh, wow. And he called me and he was like, dude, we are billing tens of thousands of dollars of ornamental work a month, and we have a stick welder and an angle grinder. Yeah. He's like, we can do this. And I was like, okay, let's figure it out. He's like, if you're in, I'm in. So we started Facebook messaging back and forth as we both had time. And he was like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? What do we want to call it? What are we going to do? Like, yada, yada, yada. So we started forming this idea. I had Cole Ironworks in the back of my head for years up to that point. That was what I wanted.
Even with the name?
Yeah, the name was what I had.
Oh, really?
It was like the only thing I knew I wanted. Yeah.
I remember you telling me once that, is this true, like you liked the name because it's almost, in your mind, sounded like Coalition Ironworks?
So that was a separate idea. I had wanted to open a maker camp training facility. Not maker camp, sorry. A maker space. And I wanted to call it like Coal Iron, because I wanted it to be metal centered, but coalition, like a group of individuals working on ironwork together. That's what I wanted to do.
Kind of done that.
I have kind of done that, yeah. Well, we've kind of done that. So I knew the name, and we went back and forth on names for a long time. And finally I was just like, oh my God, we're going to call it Coal Ironworks. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. So I already had a logo. I was doing graphic design with my wife at the time and her mom. So I put some design boards together and sent them over, and he was like, yeah, I hate this, but this is fine. Then that personal work became Coal Ironwork. So we did the infamous ring job. We did some...
I was around for that.
We did some finial work. We started doing some custom design work for other fabrication shops in the area. We did some furniture. We competed in the furniture challenge, Indie Furniture Challenge at Warner Steel in Indianapolis, which was just a blast. Like,
isn't
all
that
these
chair
little
still
things.
Downstairs? Like the chairs?
I took it home.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, just left like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I took it out just because I just wanted to have it in my home shop. And unfortunately, Evan helped me put it in the back of my truck, and Evan looked at me and said, this is a little side tangent, hey, you should strap that down. I was like, no, it'll be fine. Yeah, no.
I mean, it weighs 4,000 pounds. Roughly.
No, I broke it into pieces on the way home.
No.
Anyway, it's fine. It can all be glued together. Anyway, any hoozle. Should have listened to Evan. That's a norm. We started pulling in jobs. And I say that to say this was a really instrumental part, because Andy had more connections in the fabrication industry than I did. So he was pulling in more jobs than I was. And so we were talking about, how are we going to do this? Like, is this a 50-50 thing? Like, should you get a commission? Like, this was the biggest problem we had was, how are we each going to get paid in proportion to our contribution? Because Andy was like bringing in the work, and then we were doing the work together, and we were splitting it in different shops. And it was like really messy, like very, very hard to navigate. And he built a press, and I cannot remember why we started building presses outside. He built the very first press.
Yeah, it was a black one, H-frame, which mainly lived at my shop.
Well,
right?
he built it, and then he moved to Tennessee, and I put it in my shop for a while. Vic came over and showed me how to wire a 220 plug into my shop.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how early we were. And he built it. I had it in my little like 200 square foot shop in Carmel for a while.
Yeah.
And then it moved to your shop.
Because I remember we were going to do a tire hammer.
Yeah, well, that came later. We did build a tire hammer.
We were going to put that in the shop.
That would have been a terrible idea.
And then it would go bad. That whole shop, we could do an episode on that, just that shop.
Yeah.
And then you got that press, and I was like, that's not going to be as cool.
Well, so I had never used a press before. I'd only seen tire hammers, and I'd done everything by hand up to that point. So when I started using the press, once it was in my shop, I was like, holy crap, this is so easy to make tooling for. I can put flat dies in it, use top tools. I can do whatever I want with this. I'm forging 2.5-inch round stock which by hand was not. I was just blown away. And, you know, so I went to Andy and I was like, this is awesome. What can we do with this?
But why did he build that black press? Like, what was the...
He built it for making knives.
Just
in Damascus.
For himself.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a second. Wasn't it the guts of a former log splitter that you and I had?
No, that was that. The guts were, I guess I don't know that answer. Whether or not it was, I'm not sure.
Might have been a couple parts from it.
I think it was.
Okay.
I think the motor might have been off your log splitter because you put an electric motor on it because it was gas, and maybe he pulled it. I don't remember, but he built it. We used it for a while, and then we started this conversation about like, excuse me, we're both really interested in tools.
Yeah.
Maybe we should build a tool. So we built, I don't remember all the specifics. So we built the first 16 ton. We went to Joe's Salvage down the street. We bought a piece of I-beam, which turned out to not be I-beam. It was a piece of crane rail. So after we built the prototype, we couldn't rebuild it. We couldn't build more of them.
Yeah.
So we had enough for 2 frames, and I've got pictures on my Instagram from years ago.
Is one of them a little squishy downstairs?
No, that was the third press.
That's 3, yeah.
That was after we had to move to I-beam because we called up Westfield Steel in Westfield, Indiana, and we were like, "What is this?" And Shelly was our customer sales rep. She was fantastic, and she was like, "That is Frankenrail. I have no idea what that is. I can't help you." I was like, "Oh crap." Anyway, so we built the first one. It didn't work. The first 16 we built, the motor was a 2 horsepower motor, and it wasn't powerful enough. So I don't remember which one of us said it, but we were like, well, maybe if we like go half speed, it'll have more torque, which isn't why it worked, but that's what I thought was going to fix it. So Andy bought one off Surplus Center. We got it in. He funded that first build. We built it. We took it to SOFA, Quad State, in 2015. And we were showing it off, and I remember we took a 25-ton with us. It was the first 25-ton we'd ever built, other than the little H-frame one. We took the H-frame apart and built
the H-frame a 25?
Yeah, and we built the 25-ton C-frame with it. It didn't run when we took it to SOFA, so I didn't even take it off the trailer. And I remember specifically when I had welded it onto the top cap, it had warped. I didn't know anything about welding at this point. It had warped. And so I remember an old blacksmith at Quad State coming up and pointing at the 25-ton on the trailer and saying, "That's a little crooked, isn't it?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just the trailer." So it total, like, we were figuring it out. Like I said, just a few jobs before this was the first time I'd ever used a welder. Other than my dad was a welder, so I'd been around it. But this was we were figuring it out as we went. So we welded it, little Miller Thunderbolt 225 stick welder. And we took it to SOFA, and we didn't sell any at SOFA until we were leaving. And an old timer ran up to us with a check, and he was like, "I want one," and handed it to Andy. And that was our first sale.
That's awesome.
And so we went back, and Andy ordered some parts from a little local metal fab or metal art. We ordered some water jet parts from Metal Art.
Their shop was beautiful.
You guys almost bought it. Yeah, we did later on. Yeah, but we took the parts and we built. Then I called Shelly, and she was like, "Yeah, I can't get that material for you."
What year was that first sale?
That was 2015, 2014, 2015. It was right around there.
Okay,
somewhere around there.
2015.
I think I have it listed as 2015. Andy always said it was 2014. We've never come to a agreement, so we just stuck with 2015. But I don't know. Anyway, it was around there. But we went back, we built it. And then we had to ship it, and all of a sudden we were like, "Oh, I don't know how to ship things." So Andy went and found a pallet, and we built a crate out of 2x3s, and we shipped it. And then Andy sold another one to one of his friends. I think his name was Johnny, and old ironworker guy, and was getting into Damascus. And so he came and took a class with us, and we sold it to him, and he took it home. And so then we sold another one, another one, another one. And so then by the end of that first year, we had sold 10. And we had a huge fight because Andy was like, "That's it. We did it." And I was like, "I'm not sure that we did it."
What is it?
He was like, "That's all the blacksmiths."
Yeah.
He was like, I don't think we should pursue this.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Interesting.
What do you mean we shouldn't pursue it?
Yeah.
It's the first thing we've been good at.
Did you guys, when did you put up coaliron.com? Was it
I don't know. It was right around there. We were operating out of Facebook at this point.
Yeah.
We put up coaliron.com later, and I didn't know how to build a website, so that was a whole other thing that we've had to figure out. And I know you guys had built Mad Dwarf Workshop, but .com, right? MadDwarf.com. But we had this huge fight, and I remember we were in Vic's shop. I was sitting on the bench. We were eating that local pizza shop's pizza, whatever that was. Super greasy, but really yummy, salty pizza.
I don't even think that pizza shop's open anymore.
It is. It's still there. It's right down the street from your house. They moved like 10 feet down the street.
Pepperoni's. Pepperoni's Pizza.
In Middletown.
I thought you were talking about the...
I thought you were going to say it was the Subway that gave me E. coli. That was a fun time.
Oh,
no, but we ate there every week.
Yeah.
Because Andy got Subway gift cards every week.
And I got that while helping you guys on the Ring project, which I want you to talk more about, but continue.
So we had this huge fight. And I didn't disagree that there weren't that many more blacksmiths, but so Andy's point was we shouldn't grow, and we should just build one at a time, take orders on commission. Because he was like, if I was buying a press from his perspective, I would want to buy it from a guy in a garage that I could go and shake hands and look in his eye. And I was like, why though? Like we should grow this. We should try to
that also speaks
get into
to
a
his
bigger
character though.
Yeah, for sure.
That's just the kind of person
That's the kind of interaction he wanted to have. It was all one-on-one and very personal. And I didn't disagree that we should treat our customers that way, but I was like, I think we can do something bigger than that with this.
Right.
Yeah.
So we had a fight. Like we were fighting. And basically the conclusion was we would tentatively try it, but it would have to self-fund. Andy wasn't going to help anymore. He was like, I'm not, that all has to be self-funded. Like we take money, we build the thing. I was like, that's fine.
Yeah.
We can do that. That was a big deal because I wasn't full-time with Cole. And I wouldn't be able to be for another like year. And so...
But was Andy technically at that point?
Well, Andy was full-time, but...
Yeah, he's teaching.
He was he had other income streams. I was still working full-time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember that And I would come around occasionally.
Yeah, I would come in evenings and weekends and so I would work until 7 or 5, and then I would work from 7 to 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And that's all I could do. And he was really frustrated with me. And it was like, there was a
for
lot
like
of
2 years. If I wanted to hang out with you, I had
you could come work.
I could come work, which it was like some days that was fun. And
the others it wasn't.
Like,
no,
I've already put in 70 hours of my real job.
Well, and so why it was such a big deal was I wanted to pull some incomes to allow me to cut down on my full-time hours. And he was like, yeah, absolutely not. We need to put everything back into the business. I was like, you're not wrong, but so that was that. And we kind of butted heads on that for about a year until I was able to go full time.
Yeah.
And
I was very valid points in England.
Well, yeah, for sure. And Andy's whole thing was he was supporting his family with his income, but he didn't need to put in as many hours as I did. And so it was a real struggle. And again, what I remember from those years was just the chaos of navigating all this interpersonal conflict of just like, who are we? What are we trying to do? I have no idea. I don't even know what I like. So the presses were this natural selection, if you will, of no, we can do this and let all these other things kind of fall away. And that was the other thing. Do we want to continue taking on ornamental jobs? And the presses are a fun supplement. And I was like, heck yeah. I said, no, I don't want to take on any ornamental work. I want to do one thing and do it really well. And Andy was like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And we fought. We just argued all the time.
Well, that's because Andy was great at everything he touched.
Well, yeah, and he would get superficially good at everything.
Yeah.
But he would, that was sufficient. And my thing was I want to get really good at one thing and then slightly move over an inch. And so I was reading everything I could about welding. Then during this time we sold, like I said, I think we sold 10 presses that first year. And I'm like deep diving on lean manufacturing, which was way early. I could have chilled on that for a while.
Yeah.
But, and I was reading everything about welding. I memorized the everything. I just watched every YouTube video I could. We bought our first MIG welder, and I started welding frames with a MIG welder, and that was terrible. The frames started breaking. And then I was like, well, wait a second. Part of this is I don't know anything about welding, so I can fix that. But part of this is also I'm relying on this weld to hold this force. That seems dumb. So Andy started, we had that conversation. Andy started iterating on how we can make it out of plate. And we ordered one. And I remember at this point, we were in my little home barn, 600 square foot shop in my house. And I had this super sketchy jib crane.
It's funny. Sorry, I have a question because I was always like occasionally coming by, maybe every 2 to 3 weeks to pester you guys or work on a project. But even looking back, I'm not. It's not clear. Where did was Coal Iron Works your barn or was it Vic's shop?
So it was both. We did both. Yeah. We did work in both, and it was predicated on whose equipment we needed.
Yeah.
So I had a jib crane, and I had, I had height and room, and I had, I don't even remember what else. I had a couple things that we didn't have at Vic's shop, and Vic's shop had welders and things that I didn't have at my shop. So we would kind of split it. And the other thing that we started doing was the company I was working for at the time had a dock. And so we sold 10. We had to figure out shipping, like I said. The only way that I knew how to ship was I would build a pallet. We'd bolt the press to the pallet. We'd band it and bolt it. And then I would put it in the bed of my truck, which I had a forklift. That was the other thing. We got steel deliveries to my shop once they got larger. So that moved us into my shop.
At some point, you got a forklift. That's
I had a forklift. No, I had a forklift at that point. That was one of the
looking back for David. And you knew the operation and you knew what scale it was at. Yeah. Doesn't it feel like when you went to that shop, once it moved from being kind of spread out and once it was in the barn in Cicero, didn't it feel much bigger than it was?
Like the shop felt bigger?
No, the actual business. Like looking back at like going and helping any of those Saturdays or whatever when I was there, I was like, man, my friends are making it. They're really doing it.
Well, yeah.
It felt like it was this big, massive thing. And now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, how did you have groceries? You know?
When I would come by, the energy was like, kind of invigorating, inspiring, but also like intense. Like, whoa, you guys are. And I'm sure 90% of people listening to this probably vaguely know the history of, like, for context, for those who don't, Andy and I met when we were like 6. Our moms were like, hey, we both got these weird boys who love Legos. We should force them to hang out. That worked. We just like silently hung out and build weird shit out of Legos. And then we got into blacksmithing, and then we started, in high school, we started making swords and did the Mad Dwarf Workshop. So that's just the context. And I definitely had some fights with Andy in Vic's shop. Vic's shop was a magical Willy Wonka's factory, but also kind of like a smackdown zone. And fights with Andy were like...
There's anger in the walls. You walk in and you're like...
Angry.
Yeah.
Something's looking at me wrong.
Just context for pre-Cole of how Andy and I met and worked. And it's funny, because, I had those same... Granted, when Andy and I ran a business, we were children. Sure. It's like literally we got hired to work on, Marvel's first Thor movie to make the sword when we were, Andy was still 19 or 20. And we Skyped with the props team, the film team in LA on my 21st birthday. So that's just context for how we were just babies. And of course we were butting heads. And fights with Andy were like talking like this, which is the worst kind of fights. It's like,
I'm not a fan.
Oh shit.
And
he always had valid points. And I needed.
Yeah, but he would always say, well, I'm just being the devil's advocate
here.
Like, hey, bud, I don't really want that.
I don't like the devil. Let's not get the devil's input.
Yeah. So,
Sorry,
I think the energy was pretty wild.
Wait, was your question... rephrase that. Say that again. Was there a point at which Cole completely moved out of Vic's shop and went to your shop? Is that what you said?
So once that it was like it was like right before I moved in with you for a little while. I would go over and I would help, and it was still at the point where it was like we'd do odd jobs. I think we did a sculpture during that time, and like that was still kind of during the beginning stages. But once it was like this building is Coal Iron Works. This old barn that the city of Cicero was built around. I was like, oh man, my friends are doing it. They're making it. It felt really big.
And that was,
but looking back, it's like you said, you sold 10 presses.
Right.
That's not a lot.
That felt like a lot.
That felt like a lot.
Yeah.
Do you have that feeling too?
Oh, yes.
Or did you go in and you were like,
I felt like that
that
got real once we moved to John Street. Once we bought a shop, I was suddenly, and that's when I went full time.
Well, that's when I felt like it was smaller because there was no water in the shop. I was like, wow, they can't even afford water.
I do agree with what you're saying. Yes,
You're
when I would
not wrong.
I'm just
when I would
kidding.
come
No, you're not wrong.
when I would come to Nate's place, like there was random occasional times where Andy was like, "Hey, can we pay you, $100 for the day to come out and like grind whatever?" And I was like, "Sure." Further context, I was self-employed or 100% self-employed swordsmith at the time, and so in between commissions, I would love the excuse to hang out with these guys and help. But I'm surprised you guys repeatedly would allow me to, because every time I would come out, I would find the most creative ways to injure myself. And it was like I had never touched a power
because
tool
you had
before.
to get creative to get the project done. Like those,
I guess, but it would no,
that
it's
wasn't
just
it.
we didn't
wasn't
have.
it.
We didn't. I guess
I'd
that's
be like,
true, 'cause
hey,
I never
David,
hurt myself.
can you bevel this stack of plates? And one bevel in, he'd come back bleeding. I'd be like, dude, the one thing that you know how to do is grind. Obviously.
Yeah.
You're really good at this.
Yes.
It's the one job I don't want to do. How did you hurt yourself?
Even I was like impressed by the creativity in which I was injuring myself.
You've hurt yourself a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
that shop didn't. It was a lot of ingenuity. We don't have that tool, but
yeah, literally.
we
I don't
can
have
make
any
it,
tools.
or we can change this thing real quick, and we can do this.
I-
Everything was like, this is not ideal, but we'll get it done.
We took on a commission for a well-known blacksmith to build him a large 60-ton press. And you'll see pictures. That's that picture of Andy standing next to it in the doorway of that shop.
Yeah.
And that commission allowed me to buy, I think that was the job I went and bought a welder for. And that was the turning point in my mind, because suddenly I had everything I needed in one place. I had a forklift, I had a welding table, which the welding table was a plate from another job. That was kind of that was kind of the thing. It was like every job we took at that scale gave us one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And that was our stepping stones to next. And I think one of the things that I found really insightful looking back is, when we put production lines in place now, or we're talking about a product launch now, it's easy to jump to the scaled version of it.
Yeah.
And I think there's really some wisdom in stepping stone on its way, because one, it gives people, like the team on the production floor, it gives them an opportunity to crawl their way to that next process, that next product launch. Because it can be intimidating to say, hey, here's your new station. Here's all your new equipment. Here's the new product. Like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So I think there's some real wisdom to scaling in that same fashion, like the natural way we scaled, replicating it in our current environment. But it's also like, I've had, Logan will look at me sometimes and be like, you have shoestringed this company to a inappropriate level. Like everything's held together with duct tape and twine. And that's changed a lot in the last couple years, especially. But every commission we would get was one piece of the puzzle. And I can remember putting the welder in. This guy drove down from like Chicago. He had a beautiful late 90s white Dodge dually it was like the last year of the 12-valve Cummins. And he pulled up in my driveway and I was like, oh God. I remember that specifically. And we unloaded it with a forklift, which was really sketchy. It didn't have any brakes, barely ran. Ran on 2 cylinders at that point. I hadn't rebuilt the engine yet.
Yep.
Pulled it out, put it in the shop. I just remember plugging it in and thinking, this is real. Like, I have a welder. Then just a few months later, dropped that press that we were building on it and destroyed it. And what was cool, the difference was we had scaled enough in that little time frame, in those few months, that I looked at Andy after I dropped the welder, or the big press on the welder, and I said, we need to go buy a welder. He's like, yeah, we do. And we went and bought one. And it was like, that was buying that first welder, destroying it, and buying its replacement was the first time I felt like we had resources to grow. And that sounds so silly now, but it was really important at the time. So we went and we took it seriously. We bought a really nice welder, V350 Pro, multi-process, really nice welder. Ran on single phase power in my shop, little home shop. And I remember it was powerful enough, it would trip the breaker and I'd have to go in the house and turn the breaker back on and then walk back out to the barn. So we started really scaling and welding a lot of our own stuff at that point. And that just opened so many doors. And then I remember we were talking, we had sold 10 presses. Maybe it was the next year maybe we were starting to sell 10 presses, like maybe 8 presses a month. Yeah. And we were like, there is no way we're going to be able to do this. But one key thing I wanted to touch on, we had that first plate frame cut, and I remember I was finishing up the last I-beam frame press, and I had just built the power pack, and I had put it in the frame, and Andy had welded the slide on the plate frame press. This was the first 16-ton press made out of a single piece of plate. We put the cylinder on it. We had one cylinder that I took off a press and put it on that one. And it was plugged into the other press's power pack, and we were holding it with my jib crane, just floating in the air, and we ran it because we were trying to measure how much it would flex. If it would flex more than the I-beam, we knew it wasn't strong enough. We'd have to use bigger material. I also remember we used 1 1/8", I think, plate. And when we stacked it, the first die sets were 1 3/8". It was a non-standard plate size. It was the most expensive thing we could have possibly done. That's not what it is now. It's we were able to go down a plate size to just 1 inch.
Cool, yeah.
But at the time, we were basing it off the clevis width of the cylinder that we had. We only had one, so we thought, it has to be that. This is how we did everything. Everything was predicated on what we had at our disposal. So we put it up. It was hanging there. We ran it, and we were both like, "Oh, this is fantastic! It flexed less. This is the thing." So we built that first one. I remember posting it on Facebook, selling it to a farrier that drove from like far away to pick it up. And I remember him coming to the shop and picking it up, and we spent like 2 hours talking and shooting the poop, and just he thought the press was awesome. We had mounted the valve in the base, so down was like a stick shift in a car, and up everything was mounted underside. We changed that, but
I kind of missed that. That was kind
it
of
was only on that one, I think, but that was like our first plate frame real press, and immediately after that we moved to John Street. We started renovating this little shop we bought in Anderson. It was the first real shop.
Which might have been less square footage than
it was.
Art.
No, it was way more. It was 2,500 square foot, but we could only use half of it because the rest of it flooded every time it rained. So
I painted that place white.
You did. You even painted the floor.
It did not feel like 2,500.
So it was 2,500 square feet. That included that front part and the offices. And we had an air conditioner in the front. We would collect the condensate out of the air conditioner and use it to flush the toilet.
Yeah.
And if that's not shoestring budget, I don't know what is. We never didn't do that.
Yeah.
The big move was when we bought a nice air conditioner that had a lot of runoff that we could collect.
Well, and then making friends with the paramedics so we
next
could
door.
use their...
We would go fill our bucket with their faucet. We could have just ran a hose over. They wouldn't have cared, but we never did that.
No.
Okay, 2 questions. I don't know if I've ever asked with the first C-frame, not out of I-beam.
Yeah.
Was that just you guys winging it, your own design, or I don't know if I can probably say this publicly. Like you guys had our buddy, mutual friend Seth's input, engineer.
That was later.
So you guys did your own.
Andy drew the first plate frame on taped together sheets of printer paper.
I think I remember that. We need to find that image so I can post it.
We took it to our plate processor at the time, like that, and we said, "This is a 1-to-1 scale drawing."
And it didn't look much different from what we have now, right? I mean,
no, it had a sharp angle on the back that we got rid of. If you look at the first yellow press, I think we sold it. The guy's name was Alan. I don't remember his last name. I'm still friends with him on Facebook. He has our first yellow. It's that school bus yellow that then we painted everything for a while. I love that color. It's a good color.
It's the Cole school colors.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
The that's safety yellow. It's a slight tonal change. But anyway, we drew it out on printer paper, and we didn't know that it would work. We based the dimensions off, but the reason that we made it out of plate was because at the time we were taking an I-beam, welding a 5/8 plate on the face of the I-beam, and then we were welding our clevis mount to the face of the 5/8 plate. And what would happen was we were stressing that clevis mount joint. And so our goal in using a single piece of plate was that we weren't relying on the weld in its weakest direction. That was something that we learned about designing a weldment. Yeah. And, neither of us went to school for this. So we were 100% like, that looks like it'll work. We'll build one. Yeah. And so we built one.
Which at this time, one not working could shatter everything.
Yeah.
Like, we can't do this anymore because we spent
that just wouldn't have been an option. We would have if it hadn't worked, we would have welded on fish plate reinforcements at the critical joints. I mean, we would have made it work.
Right.
But yeah, no, we didn't have the option of if this doesn't work. So
there's no failure.
We felt pretty confident. And I think Andy did do a calculation that we had similar amounts of material in the two frames, and that's what we based our stress load stuff off of. But no, Seth coming and doing an analysis on the frame happened at John Street.
Okay, yeah, Seth, context, awesome guy. I went to high school with him, fantastic engineer. He's now a farmer.
Yeah, he is a tremendous farmer. His family has incredible historical roots.
Firm Root Farms.
Yeah, they do flowers. Yes. The nicest flowers I have ever. And I buy them every opportunity I get.
And maple syrup. Really good maple syrup.
Very good maple syrup. Yeah. And he does flavored maple syrup.
Yes.
He has just
is
beautiful
it not
property.
Just maple syrup.
He has maple syrup, and then he also does coffee bean infused maple syrup.
Tried that.
It's very good. He has vanilla, where you just have a jar with vanilla beans in it. Ooh. He does some really nice stuff. Yeah, it's freaking yummy.
Okay, so
I was doing a terrible job of Wow.
Yeah, we're gonna move on from that. Yeah. So all right. So we have our new shop at John Street. We've got our presses. We're starting to make them out of plate frame. We have Seth come out and check the engineering on them, safety factors and whatnot. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So. What's the point? I think the next tipping point from like, oh man, this is a business to what's the tipping point to say, we need to hire someone. This is too big. This is too much for just me.
So what we did was we started selling out of that new shop. We're making things. My wife is doing all the bookkeeping for us. Jill did it for a while. Andy's wife, Jill, did it for a while. Then my wife did it for a while. It wasn't a fun job.
Before you progress on the coal history, I'm question that's nagging at me because I can't remember where it's placed in the chronology of coal history. When did the ring for the Nestle factory project happen?
That was in Cicero.
No, it was at Vic's shop because I helped with it.
Was it at Vic's shop?
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't forge them. We cut them.
Had Coal Iron Works become a press company at that point, or was that before? No,
it was before that.
No, it was way before.
So that must have been 2015, early 2015 or late 2014.
Yeah, that
I don't think Coal Iron Works because that would I'm trying to remember something along the lines of we started that job.
Can you explain what it was?
I did that job on vacation when I lived in Illinois. So I came home for vacation and got put to work.
So did Noah.
Yeah.
So did everyone. Luke and John came and you visited. Remember, that was when I smashed my finger in the trail.
It was my buddy I used to live with, an old roommate, Nate Hack. And
was there too.
He was talking to you, deep conversation. We were all getting philosophical, and your mid-philosophical talk just smashed your hand into
just my index finger.
Ground beef.
Yeah.
We felt real bad.
Fine. Yeah. Still not quite right, but... So
okay.
The ring job was one of the things that we had started to do before we got into presses. That was, we would get contracted by local fabrication shops, and they would hire us to make parts that they didn't want to make or weren't equipped to make. And Andy and I were so, yeah, we can do that to everything. That, that was kind of the basis of our engineering platform, was figuring out how to make tools and equipment to make the things that we were hired to make. Mm-hmm. So Andy built that contraption, that horrifying contraption to roll the rings on a pipe threader. He even went to the extent of getting his glove stuck in it once, just to...
Yeah, he did. It was a day I was there.
Just to mess with us.
What was the machine actually? What was it?
It was a pipe threader.
Yeah. Pipe threader.
So it's for threading black pipe up to like 2-3 inch black pipe. It was a big pipe threader.
And he used it to bend cold...
We would bend cold, half-inch round hot roll and coil it. And then it would... Once it got to the end, that would release it. He'd knock the end off, slide the ring off, and feed the next one.
Yeah.
And we were hanging the half-inch rod from rope that we had hung from the trusses.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it would feed it into the thing. And you had to maintain a lot of pressure on it.
I annoyed you guys one day by recording little video montage of how psycho that project was. And so, Evan, I'll have to share it with you so you can overlay it to give context to the viewers.
So that job was especially bad.
Yeah.
Because after we finished all the rings, we loaded them up, we took them to the fabricator, and they said, oh, OSHA won't approve these because there's rust on them. And there was a little bit of surface rust just because Vic's shop was really wet. And so I took a bunch home, Andy took a bunch home, and we would sit, and we also didn't know anything at this point. Remember that. We would take WD-40 in a spray bottle and steel wool, and we hand removed the surface rust and oiled every single ring, 14,000 of them, and then loaded them back up and shipped them back, and they're like, oh yeah, these are great.
Ridiculous.
Awesome. So, but it taught us a lot about that we were idiots.
Can you give context to what, maybe it's not relevant, but I think it's cool, what those were used for?
Well, they were used for sprinkler covers in the Nestle plant. So the Nestle plant is like 5 stories tall or something. It's a massive facility. And they would run into, in their storage facilities, that a sprinkler head would get touched and release. And once the sprinkler system goes off, it all goes off.
All of them go off.
And so then that whole area, broken into like quadrants. And this is how it was explained to me. This could all be false. But it would get bumped. The bump would cause a release, and they'd lose like $100,000 of product in an hour or in 20 minutes or something like that. And so this fabrication shop got hired to make these covers. And I don't know, this might all be NDA. I don't know.
It's like years ago now. So
yeah,
that's
it.
The fabrication shop might not even be around.
They are. But
was it with Metal Fab?
We're not going to say.
Oh, okay.
It's all going to be a secret.
It's a secret.
Okay, so that was the ring job. Okay. And we got a couple like that. Then we got another one. Yeah, we got a bunch of jobs like that, like dozen.
Yeah, and I was there the day that Andy was like, thought it would be real funny to try to play a prank on you. And
I
me.
also don't think it was a prank.
No.
I think he caught his glove in it and got his hand out and was like, that was a prank. I pranked you.
Name one other time Andy's ever been
He has pranked me one other time.
Yeah. Andy's not a pranker.
He did prank me by accidentally cutting a live 208 3-phase line.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That was another prank that he did. That wasn't a prank. Brand new set of heavy-duty wire snips, too. Burned a nice little half moon. And we were too broke, so we had to keep using them. But anyways. So yeah, you had asked the question about
what
employees.
point is it too big? What point do you have to bring somebody on?
I think one of the things that I started reading books about businesses and how people started businesses. And one of the books that I read was, this is so... The E-Myth. Yeah. And I think you told me about it, right? You might have told me about it. Really? Maybe I told you about it. But anyway, the E-Myth by Gerber, I think, or something like that. So I read that and I was like, Andy, you have to read this. So he read it and we were just like, oh my gosh, we have to work on the business, not in the business. And so when we started pursuing that, we were like, oh, if we're out here making everything, then we can't be growing anything.
Right.
So what happened was we had gotten way too many orders. So I opened the website and we got like 60 orders. And so we had, if you guys remember this, there was a big sheet of plywood in the office and there were screws and every screw had a clipboard on it. And every clipboard on John Street.
Yeah.
Every clipboard had an order. And the wall was full, and there was a stack. I had to go buy more clipboards. Yeah. And there was a stack of to-be-done clipboards at the bottom. And we were like, so we called you, Noah would come out, people would come and help. Yeah. And one of the things that was really complicated was we would take an order, and then we'd build the project. And that's fine. What happened was when we got 60 orders, our lead time went from like a week to 16
and some
weeks.
Of those were custom orders, right?
Yeah, and there was custom stuff sprinkled in there, and that was a whole nother thing. That's a thing that we're still learning how to do.
Yeah?
Yeah. So we just took it one at a time. We would order enough for about 2 weeks of runtime, So then as we were building things, we'd run into lead times from supply chain. We'd go to place an order because we only had enough capital. We had all this cash from all those orders, but we had to have cash flow. So once our lead time got up to 16 weeks, the orders really slowed down. People didn't want to wait half a year or whatever it was, a quarter of a year. So so our cash flow got really tight, and that was hard. I remember being at the shop, and we were working a lot, and we were like, okay, so we need to hire. The problem was, if we were good at business, we would have hired someone, trained them, and then sold a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But we sold a bunch of stuff. So now not only am I trying to hire someone in the midst of we have too many things to do crisis, now I'm trying to learn how to train somebody in the midst of that.
Right. Because the thing, going back, Andy had worked in the ornamental shop down in Tennessee.
Yeah.
He had a few jobs. You had a job in a coffee shop, and you had a graphic design job.
Freelance.
You guys didn't have hardly any criteria to know, how do I hire people? Why do I hire people? What are we looking for?
How do you manage someone?
How do you manage somebody?
Right.
And those are things that people learn on somebody else's dime, right? Most people who come up and own their own business have their failures in hiring working for some other guy. Sure. They come up through management, they do that stuff. You guys are like, hey, if we hire you, you have to work out or else my kids don't go to college. Yeah. you gotta work.
Yeah, well, and then, we hired Peyton was our first hire. And Peyton was awesome. Yeah. Peyton was really good.
I don't think I ever met him.
Yeah, Peyton was a good guy.
He was like one of 8 kids and was just a super hard worker at everything he did. We'd give him a task, he'd figure it out. He ruined us because then as we began hiring just normal people.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say something.
Well, I do, but continue.
Yeah, so we hired another guy, and that was a really difficult hire and was really hard. And everyone that was working for us at this point, we were considering contractors, and it was just really messy. Mm-hmm. But we didn't know any better. And I had only ever been, I guess I was a W-2 employee at the coffee shop, but I had almost always been a 1099 employee, a contractor working on my own time.
Well, even at the coffee shop, did they ever do the 1099 for you?
I don't remember.
They would come to me.
They would separate out my hours.
Yeah, they would say, "Hey, well, when you were fixing the closet or whatever, because I had to reframe a door or something. Not reframe a door, but I had to fix something." And they were like, "Well, you're 1099 for these.
You're right.
3
You're
hours.
A contractor for this.
But they would pay me quadruple.
Right. Well, then you pay your own
hours.
taxes. Right.
Yeah, and then they'd be like, "But you have to pay your own taxes." It's like, dude, I made $1,200 that year off 1099. Why would I claim it? The government's not gonna. But they did. They did notice.
They do. Yeah, no, the 1099 stuff's tricky. But anyway, we thought I need more hands. Mm-hmm. The problem was we were the only people training. Mm-hmm. So I think if I were to go back and try all of this again, what I would have done was I would have gone out and paid a lot more money for somebody that was either already skilled in some of these things or something along that line, and then trained them how to build and spent all of my time training them. The problem is the only way that I could have done that is if we had an outside vendor that was making this stuff for us already. And that could have been another avenue entirely. We could have outsourced all the manufacturing. I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah.
I listened to How I Built This. And these guys are like, I invented this product, and then I went out and found a shop, then they made it. And it's like I was listening to the Uni pizza ovens, and he was like, I designed this pizza oven, and then I had this fabricator make it for me. I was like, how dumb am I that I didn't even know you could just have someone else do this work for you?
And I feel this kind of goes back to your Kanban statement.
Yeah.
Where you were like, I tried to do lean way too fast.
Way fast.
I feel like there was times especially after you read the E-Myth, because I had to fill out a workbook when you read the E-Myth, and I didn't even work here yet.
Just to hang out and be friends with them. You're like, if we're gonna hang out, you have to do this.
If you're gonna hang out with me,
what happened was
business.
you signed up for
the I forgot about that.
The consultant, and you would do these classes with them or certain times or whatever.
So intense.
And you had said, I think I want Francis to come because he has all this experience in managerial.
The managerial stuff I didn't have.
All the stuff that you didn't have. And the guy was like, don't hire him. You can't replace him.
Correct.
Never hire him.
Never hire a unicorn. So this I would like to make a point here. I was consistently faced with the dilemma of, I am a small business planning to be a big business,
right?
Pretending to be a big business, and acting like a big business never worked. And I don't know what to do with this, but pretending, not hiring unicorns, building systems at a level that would allow just a layman off the street to walk in and do that job, the Kanban system, so many of these things never worked for us.
Right.
And I think what happened was, by pretending to be a big business, I never got that incremental growth like we did in the beginning. So we didn't scale naturally. I tried to skip a step. And the reality was, if I had poured into one or two people a lot and made them really incredible extensions of Andy and I, but instead I was like, no, we need to hire a couple people, like a bunch of people. And that was, Andy was really right. Andy wanted to hire one guy and train him to be our replacement. I was like, well, no, that's a unicorn. We'll never replace that person.
And that's kind of gets into what my question was going to be. You almost have already answered it, is how much of the business looking back was it, you know, oh man, I listened to the wrong people? Because we always talk about like, oh, I hired the wrong person or whatever. But you were going into these consultations where like,
well, consultations, we had
those businesses they were consulting for were massive.
Well, and it's really, they're very different. And I couldn't grasp that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I realized later, I realize now looking back, was there's a million different ways we could have done it. We chose a way. I'll never know what it would have been like if I chose a different way. But I think I diverted a lot of my attention to working on the business. And I think I did it backwards in a lot of ways. I was focusing on things that didn't bring a lot of value. And one of the things I learned a lot later when I was studying Lean in a context that I think was a lot more applicable, Lean is all about creating a system of value for the customer,
right,
and not doing anything but that.
Yeah.
And I was really consumed with functioning and looking like a Lean system rather than looking at our system and saying, what is the bare minimum that we need to have? Like, I'm good at shoestringing things, but I did it to the extent of I wouldn't throw anything away just in case we needed it, thinking like that's saving money. Like there was just a lot of weird dichotomies in my personality that came out in this process, and it just didn't. It was really, really, really fun, really enjoyable, but it set us back in a lot of ways, I think.
I think this will be really beneficial to a lot of people. What other? Well, I don't. Yeah, maybe. The question I was going to ask is, what other example? Like, give more examples of what were wastes of time for you.
No, you don't do it. David, as an employee who came in during this time, no, I'm dead serious. As an employee who came in during this time, you would paint, you were ramping Bridgeports, you were doing
crashing Bridgeports.
Getting them up off the ground. You were ramping them.
Sweet
so
jumps.
You were doing all kinds of stuff just to help out your friends who, you were getting paid. But I don't think you would have taken this job if it would have been some guy off the street came and offered it to you. You came because
I wasn't never
Andy.
an official Cole employee until 2019. But to be clear, but I would come in.
You had to deal with the day-to-day processes.
Sure.
And
occasionally, yeah.
What are some of the things that they did starting out? Because I also I would come in and do kind of some stuff, and I have a few things that I can think of. But what?
Oh no!
What experiences did you have that you're like, oh man, I feel like it would have been much better if we would have invested in this early and not put it to the backside, or if we wouldn't have invested in this and gone straight forward with it?
You're asking that question to me?
Yeah. You have those experiences.
I guess if I'm understanding your question correctly, looking back, I don't know, because I mean, I do wonder how much of that like grunt work, like deburring things or cutting custom parts, which I did a lot for you guys, could have been outsourced, to another company. But then again, I don't know what companies could have done that.
Yeah, literally all of them.
But
every company.
The reason that we had a lot of that stuff done was we thought being in charge of it would save us money, and in some ways I think it did. But I think more importantly, we didn't take enough time to explore those other avenues.
Yeah.
You know, I think we should have spent a lot more time making sure that our system wasn't dumb rather than saying, how do we improve it?
Yeah, I mean, I find this in knife making
system that we're using.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot of this from you guys and like Logan. Like, oh yeah, if I'm going to do a small batch production run of 20 knives, sure, I can make the sheaths or whatever, but it's in my interest to outsource it. You know, even if it costs more, and trim down the process. So.
Yeah, I think.
Well, spending money is saving labor time.
So
is your labor time worth as much as you're spending on the
Andy
sheaths?
and I could have gone the route, and I think this would be the biggest thing that I took away. Andy and I could have, and honestly, maybe should have, gone the route of, rather than diving into hiring people, diving into hiring other companies to do work for us. We could have maintained him and myself and an accountant for a long time. We needed production hands sooner than we were capable to run them. And what happened was this constant back and forth between, okay, I focus on selling. I sold too much. Focus on production. I can build too much. Focus on selling. I can make, and we just jumped back and forth between that for years. And we could have simply gone to another manufacturer and said, hey, I'm going to focus on selling. You need to focus on making. Here's our quality standards. Make it.
Right.
And then I'll sell it. And if you need to ramp up, I don't have all the infrastructure costs of ramping up. But instead, I took everything in-house. Now, I look back at that fondly. I'm glad that we have the capability that we had now. It cost everything.
Right.
Everything that we made went back into the business. We had our NOMA meeting here. And there was another industry guy that was there walking through. And he was like, man, you guys have a lot of stuff. It's like, yes, we do. You know, because it was like all capital, all profit, and even sometimes more than profit would be dumped into growing capability.
Right.
And it was a constant pursuit of growing capability. And I think we have good capability now. But it's a bit contrived when in reality, that was just a different way of doing things. We could have outsourced a lot. And I think what would have been beneficial was if we had outsourced a lot, we could have really hyper-focused on specific aspects like inventory management. The fact that we figured out our inventory management system basically last year is insane.
Yeah,
that should have been the first thing that we did.
Bringing our buddy, shout out to our amazing friend Chris Choate, who Andy and I have been friends with for years, ever before we met you, and he's been such. I can't even calculate. I'm sure you guys can how much money he's saved us.
I can put a number on it.
It's a lot.
That's part of my job,
and it's fantastic. So,
but I would go. The reason that I asked you that question is because I think in the dealings that I had with you, I come from a background of leadership's job is to teach, is to lead, to be hand in hand until you're able to do it, and then to let you fail. And I would say that in my experiences, that 5 years that Cole was a business, 6 years Cole was a business before I technically worked here, it was me constantly telling you, get involved, be a leader, be part of that team. You can't just hire people in off the street, just like you're saying, where you're like, I want to create a system where I want to hire somebody off the street. And when I came and I worked here, we opened up heavy fab within the first couple months. And the first thing that we decided was the first 3 weeks that this guy works here, he is not going to be able to cough without doing it on me. There will be somebody here with him at all times.
Right.
And I think that's a lesson, even if it's subconscious and you're not able to necessarily pick it out. One thing that I've seen is in those experiences where you were just constantly working on your business and never in it. Now it's almost the opposite, where it's like, okay, we need you in the business for this amount of time, and then you go work on your business, and you're still trying to be inside the business. So I think that is a lesson that you've learned, and it's almost
I would say though that
tailed to the other end.
It's difficult to quantify it from the perspective of before we moved into this building, I was sitting next to Shiloh in the CNC department running parts on the lathe.
Right.
Because I didn't have anybody trained up to run the lathe. And so there's a lot of aspects where it's like I would dive, maybe this is the key point. I would dive in and do anything that needed done. I would sweep, I'd change machine tool parts out. I would fix stuff. I did tons of electrical because I'm cheaper than an electrician at the time. I did a lot of that. But I think what you're pointing to is it seemed like my team was always hungry for development.
Right.
But I never had enough time to do that.
Yes.
That's like the one thing I couldn't make enough time for. And it always felt like if I developed someone else was getting missed. Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't someone, it was a customer or it was a project. One of the things that was the most distracting that we did, and I've now talked to several manufacturers all over the United States about this same thing. We started taking on custom work, and I probably lost $100,000 over the last 10 custom presses we built because we never made a system. It was completely predicated on my ability to build it, Andy's ability to draw it, or whatever part he was playing. And then we'd get to the end of it, and it's like, I think one of the last ones had like a year lead time on it, and we blew that. We were like 18 months in. And it's like, 18 months in, $15,000 over budget. I've already paid, like the guy's already paid for it. I'm not going back to him and asking for more money.
It's funny how similar this is to swords,
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So what I took away from that was, the commission process stinks. And I know a ton of guys in the industry that have made that same decision for their own personal work, but especially for someone like us,
it's so difficult.
It can be extremely profitable. Where I am doing a custom job right now that is going to be, theoretically, it's not done, but I'm not behind on it.
Right.
Holy crap. I've never had a commission that I was on schedule for.
The thing is once you have that system in place as well, so you have a system in place that you're understanding and working through, so you're able to add value to the company by accepting this.
Sure, this one or two. Yeah.
This other company is adding tremendous value to their operation.
Right. Through this process.
Because they don't have the system in place.
Right. And they don't need the infrastructure to do all of this work.
Because they're never going to do it again.
Right.
So I think you're right. Like, we lost a lot of money on those customs, but now that we have that system in place, it's like we're now able to go through and not just offer value to our company and our employees and things like, but other companies now we have that infrastructure. Right. Hey, we've had the failures. Let us let us do it.
No, I paid that tuition. I think one of the things though, what I realized that the system is, and I caught myself doing this the other day. I take an aspect of the project and I try to own it. And what I'm realizing is, no. The system is, I have this wonderful CNC department. I have a very competent heat treater. I have assemblers that can take my pieces and put them in a machine. And then I can be responsible for the design and making sure that the design is performing and functioning well, rather than design it, make it, heat treat it, test it, break it, cry, design it again.
When you say own it, it means basically just that, like you over-invest in yourself?
So like, for example, the other day, I was working on this custom die set. I broke what I was working on.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of handing that project off to my team, I went over to the chop saw. First, I tried to fix it with a welder and broke it more. Then I got it broke way more. Then I had to disassemble the whole machine, pull it out, cut it apart, remachine the parts. I forged a new piece. I'm testing this new punch. I get it stuck. And I'm just like, by the end of the day, I'm just devastated. And I used to feel that all the time. And what I realized was I wasn't relying on my team.
Right.
I took the reins and tried to own the whole project, of which I am only a specialist in 2 areas. I'm not a specialist at machining anymore. I'm not a specialist at welding. I'm not a specialist at anything other than I have a huge experience background of
breaking things,
with destroying things, but more importantly, designing things with that how to break it knowledge in mind.
And forging.
And I have a huge background in forging. I've been doing that since I was a child. And I think what I'm realizing is, that's my point of greatest contribution, which is a phrase we haven't used in a while, but I used to love that phrase. That's my point of contribution in 2 ways. I find the greatest amount of fulfillment in it. That's how you define greatest point of contribution. You find the most amount of fulfillment in it. I'm not pulling my hair out. And I'm handing it off to a team of people who none of them will be pulling their hair out.
And all of them are genuinely excited to come to a solution.
We get to function as a team, row the boat together, and end up with a way better product at the end. Yeah. Now that that's finally in place, I'm still kicking against the goad regularly because it's my nature to. But it doesn't, I see it, I realize my anguish, and I turn.
Yeah.
And I went to my CAD program, I started designing the next model, I sent it over to my CNC department, he's machining it today.
Right.
It'll be at the heat trader tomorrow. Right. You know, it's like,
yeah.
And I'm not in tears, but I trust that not only is my design excellent, what I get back will be excellent because I'm owning my part and my team is owning their part.
We should dig into this more on a whole other episode.
I think we kind of moved beyond the scope of
of introing coal, the history of coal. But seriously, I think this could add so much value to everybody. Even if, you listening are just a knife maker and you don't have any plans or dreams to be a multi-million-dollar company, like everything you're saying is still
thing that it's
still applicable because I'm learning and navigating this even right now as you guys bless me with the opportunity to do my work and have it hopefully bless and serve Cole as well. Of like, back when I was helping you guys, you and Andy, in the early days of Cole, I was probably working on my business, Cedar Lore, too much. And now I'm in a season of working in my business where to people online, it probably looks like, does David make blades anymore? And it's like, I do. I'm just so busy doing
Making
it. But
blades.
You gotta have, you gotta have that balance, and it's hard to strike that. And then also, I think the other thing you're rightly, the myth you're dispelling is, the myth of like romanticizing me doing it all myself.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
It's kind of like over romanticized, like handmade everything. It's like, that's great. You can do that, but there's no shame in outsourcing.
It doesn't have to be my hand.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think building capability in your surrounding community and then relying on it is something we're going to talk about a lot. And I think in this aspect specifically, I wish I had done that sooner. I think that's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
So,
well, we've gone over first of all, how everybody met, the crazy junction that was everybody trying to be buddies and starting a business out of it, and it ended up everybody working together, and countless people that we know have worked for Cole, and it's been for a season or whatever. But we've gone over that. We've gone over some of the lessons that we've learned. Now, I know that we can't share a lot about the future because it's not here yet and we don't know it. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to over the next maybe year or 2 years coming out? What are some of the things that you're stoked about?
So I think on a back end note, I'm excited about being able to profitably and repeatably and consistently. Is that enough adjectives?
Almost. Yeah. I knew you were going to.
And concisely and consistently producing solutions to problems to our customers that we haven't been able to go down that rabbit trail. Applications is a really, 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 really tenuous prospect to add to our functional team, but I think we have enough of a framework. I'm excited to see how that pans out. We've got some product offerings that I think are going to be application specific enough that people can get a real solution to their problem, whatever it is. Bringing on the larger press line has opened the door to several possible contracts with larger scale manufacturers, and that's been a dream of mine since I was a kid, to build big industrial machines. I'm excited about launching some machines that haven't been made in the United States in decades,
right?
Which is
close to a century.
I think 1960s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think so.
That's
someone will know.
60 to 70
Will
years.
Stelter will probably know.
Will Stelter will know.
So, yeah, I'm excited about what we're doing next. I think what really gets me going is seeing you developing the team into a framework of competency and capability that allows me to leverage that competency that we've built and invested in for so long, and really do something meaningful with it. On top of, we're building a community here, and more than anything we build,
I think there's going to be a lot of people that resonate with this and probably will hate me for saying
resonate with it. They'll put in
resonate. Resonate. It'll resonate with them. Everywhere you work has this little thing they say at company meetings is we're just a little family. We're just a little family. I worked for a little family of about 6,000 people for 10 years.
Right.
Much more than 6,000 people. I think it's 6,000 full-time employees, but that's not even counting that 75% of their workforce is part-time. But
sure.
We actually are 15 people that genuinely care about each other.
Yeah.
And the thing that got me the most excited when I came, because I came and did some interviews with people my position didn't really exist, right? So I came and I said, what do you need from me? What do you need? What are you missing? I need to know what to do.
Right.
Because what I'm getting hired for is something I am not able to do, which was, production manager.
Sure.
And I have this background in people, not in production. Right. So what do you need? What do you need? And every single one of them was like, dude, we just need somebody. Like we just need somebody we can rely on.
Yeah.
We need somebody that, you don't need to answer my problem. Mm-hmm. You just need to let me talk to you while I flesh it out, right?
Sure.
So, when you say we're building a community, it's funny because a lot of businesses say that.
Yeah.
And a lot of businesses try really hard, and I think that that's a good kind of initiative to have. But that was never... You were never like, hey, I'm going to start this business and everybody's going to move with me on this compound. But we're 2 steps away from that, right? Without trying, just because you were in the business for so much and you were working hand in hand with people genuinely care about the business on a much higher rate than any other job I've ever experienced.
Yeah, sure,
people care. People take it personally when customers have issues, not because, the customer doesn't know what they're doing.
Right.
I did something that failed this person, and this person put a lot of faith in us.
Right.
So I've never experienced that.
Sure.
And the community that we're building also, have you ever heard a customer talk about us? That's one of the reasons I was really stoked to come over was like, Google Cole Ironworks, and it is insane the amount of pride people have in owning one of our products. Yeah. Taking pictures with it. It's like, hey, I met the Cole Ironworks boys. I'm going to put it on my Instagram. And it's like, it's always like, dude, you're literally feeding me. Why are you wanting to take a picture with it? It's very humbling. So it's just really cool to hear you say community, because that's been a word that's kind of been in my mind for the past couple weeks. And it's really like, we have our crew, we have our team, we have our family here. But there's this amazing community that I have probably 5 or 6 people that email me once a week. Just showing me what they're working on. Hey, just wanted you to know, I made this knife. And it's always, even if I can't respond in the moment, it's always like, yes, this is so cool, And I've got an old guy named Joe that calls me about once a week. He was the first press I ever sold over the phone.
Yeah.
His name, I won't say his full name, but he calls me and I just want to make sure my buddy Francis is doing well. And I'll be like, oh, what have you been forging lately? Haven't had time to get back to the shop.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure. And it's so cool to experience that.
Right.
Thing that every other company always talks about.
Sure. Well, I think we're not going to get into this, but societally, we have to build communities up.
Oh, we need
in a way that, previously it was based on where you lived, but now it's oftentimes much more about what you do. And I think we have the opportunity to participate in a community of makers and people that are building things, which is the exact community I want to be a part of.
Yeah. And people chose to be a part of that community. You're not thrust into it.
Right.
So there's a lot more support here,
That's awesome.
That feels like a good stopping point, though. This was a very long
this went a lot longer than we intended.
Evan looks tired.
Evan looks very tired.
Our producer is worn out.
This is Nathan Brandt. He's the co-founder of Cole Ironworks. You can find him on Instagram at Brandt Blacksmith, right? Brandt Blacksmith? Right.
Brandt Blacksmith.
And this is David Delagardelle. He does so many things here. He's part of the marketing team. He kind of puts out some projects and stuff. He tests. Big part of R&D that you never get credit for is when we make something new, we're like, hey, try this out. And you can tell us pretty quickly its functionality. He's come up with a few ideas for dies, but he's an amazing bladesmith, amazing
world-renowned mythopoetic
just media engineer. He draws, he writes. It's beautiful. Check him out at Cedar Lord Instagram. And I guess we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye.
Adios.